The child was dead. Not sick, not dying, dead. Not a day over 19 months into its promising young life, and its candle had been snuffed out by a single nip from a rattler's fangs. Its coming into this world had been hard. Death had been easy. The guilt aided her like the slow wake of 1,000 mosquito bites. She knew that ache well. That dull, yet constant itch was how you knew you were alive in the swamps of the city that had once been her home in Nauvoo, Illinois, only a few years prior. As she stood over Samuel's lifeless corpse, face sapped of color, and still as a doll, she let not a single tear fall from her ocean blue eyes. And that is an excerpt from the book I'll be reviewing today, The Resurrection Box by Declan Hyde. Mr. Hyde mentions in the afterword of the book that inspiration for this novella started as a short story. A religious horror anthology made an open call for stories, and he wanted to answer the call by writing a story about his faith as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or as the novella's tagline expresses, a tale of Mormon horror. In the back of Mr. Hyde's mind was the idea for a Western about a magic coffin that brings people back to life. Also knocking around were thoughts about Mormon history and the challenge of creating what he describes as an authentically Mormon character. This inspired Declan to make his main character a polygamous wife, for he saw it as an interesting challenge, and one that felt unique to him personally, because he'd never read a story like that before. All these elements fused together, developing a story, and soon Declan realized he had something much larger in his hands, a full-length novella. The Resurrection Box tells the story of polygamous wife Zena Minor, who one day suffers the grief of her young 19-month-old son Samuel dying from an unexpected rattlesnake bite. She's overwhelmed by her grief, questioning God's will, trying to understand why after so many years of living obediently to God's commandments, now one of her greatest joys, her son, has been taken from her so soon. Zena has endured a lot over the years leading up to this point. She endured the challenge of crossing the plains into unsettled territory, such as hunger and the elements and other perils. Later, she also accepted the challenge of entering a plural marriage. By the way, this is a key moment in the development of Zena's character. Her effort of praying about the decision to enter a plural marriage is the first moment she truly and personally seeks to hear God on a matter. The passage reads, quote, "She was determined to pray all night, if she had to, until she understood what he wanted her to do. But she had hardly been praying a minute when she felt the strongest, most joyous spirit fall upon her. It was like being wrapped in a warm cloak, like summer sun bursting forth from her breast. It was an answer from God." End quote. I bring this moment in the story up because prayer serves as a potent element to the plot, as well as a theme in the story. Zena endured all these past struggles and challenging decisions for it to all now seem for nothing. Despite her obedience, the greatest gift of her son has been taken so soon. She weeps for him, begs for his return, and at one point decides that living life without Samuel isn't worth it. She begins her march to some cliffs where she plans to jump and commit suicide. However, an angel appears unto her in a vision before she can do so. We don't get a dramatized scene of her vision, but we learn there's a coffin located in the nearby mountains with the power to resurrect her dead son. So now a journey of faith begins, and enter Bill Pratchett, a rough-around-the-edges fur trader who decides to become Zena's guide in the mountains after learning of her quest. He has motives of his own, of course, and motives not totally selfless. He hopes to be able to use the coffin to make money after she uses it to bring back her dead son. He imagines people will pay a pretty penny for the service of a coffin that can resurrect the dead. Bill Pratchett at one time was a part of the Mormon Church. It was after the declaration of the plural marriage law that he turned away from the church. To put it in his words, he thought it was the devil's blight. A man named Clyde Jones is after the coffin as well. His motivation is revenge, and his target is Bill Pratchett. The feud started back in Missouri. Clyde and his men were the first to volunteer in the efforts to push out the Mormons. From their point of view, they were defending their rights and property from Mormon invasion, but the Mormons fought back against the attack, and Clyde's father was killed in the skirmish. The second attempt to confront Pratchett in the Utah area failed as well, Pratchett killing 4 of his men. Clyde receives a visitation from an angel as well, as he's carrying out the dirty, rigorous work of digging a grave for his dead compatriots. The visitor tells him of the coffin, that he can use it to revive his team and carry on with his quest to kill Pratchett. What happens last in this scene is interesting to note. As Clyde reaches out to shake the hand of this visitor, the passage describes, quote, "To Clyde's surprise, his fingers passed right through the figure's flesh. It felt as if nothing were there at all. Surely this had to be a spirit messenger from heaven." End quote. This moment in the story is another way Mr. Hyde makes the tale uniquely Mormon. The depiction of Clyde's interaction with the messenger is based on a revelation written by Joseph Smith in the Doctrine and Covenants, a book of scripture for Latter-day Saints. The revelation tells of how to discern between an angel of God or one of the devil. Quote, "If it be the devil as an angel of light, when you ask him to shake hands, he will offer you his hand, and you will not feel anything. You may therefore detect him." End quote. And that comes from section 129, verse 8 of the Doctrine and Covenants. With this newly obtained knowledge, Clyde begins his own quest for the coffin. Clyde's motivation is revenge. Zena's motivation is grief, hope, and faith. Both their paths collide in horrifying calamity. Even though I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I don't often read much fiction with the label of the church attached to it. Mostly because I'm always worried about that the entertainment factor might be diminished, that the story might feel like a Sunday school lesson instead. Sometimes I'm kind of worried that it'll come across like they're trying to sell their testimony, which feels kind of morally wonky to me. Not so with Mr. Hyde's novella, though. It feels very much like a fun, thrilling horror story. Doctrine and principles of the church are brought up in the story, but not in an author-intruding, distracting way. I never felt like Declan was preaching to me. Such details served well for backstory and character development purposes. Zena Minor is a Mormon character, after all. She will think and act like a Mormon. I found Zena to be a fairly likable character. She's thoughtful, with a delicate touch to her demeanor. Sometimes she felt a little idealized, more of what we want to be instead of how we truly act, though I will use the words of her companion Bill Pratchett here. Something tells me she has more faith than I do. I also want to mention there's some very ferocious, disturbing monsters depicted towards the climax of the story as well. I think you guys will have some fun with that part. Prayer and faith are 2 themes that resonate strongly in the story, along with the dynamics of man's relationship with God. The story suggests faith is a journey, and oftentimes we don't know the how of the journey until the very moment, when God delivers the how. Then we must act with courage. While this is a horror tale, its themes are quite uplifting. Near the story's climax, the theme of sacrifice knells powerfully as well. The Resurrection Box by Declan Hyde is due out October 24th. I highly recommend it for Halloween reading. My rating for the story is a 4 out of 5. And that concludes my review of The Resurrection Box by Declan Hyde. And this is DeathGroundReviews, the monster that devours horror, suspense, and all those things of the fantastic. I'll see you next time.